and welcome to the Exponent Philanthropy and CDP webinar, Hurricane Harvey Recovery, How Small Funders Can Respond. Hurricane Harvey was the largest storm to make landfall in the United States in more than a decade. It devastated much of South and Central Texas and damaged parts of Louisiana. This storm is the largest disaster event the United States has faced in years, and it will take weeks before we know the true outcome of damages caused by Harvey. My name is Regine Webster, and I'll be moderating our discussion today. To provide some insight on giving in disasters, we have with us today Lori J. Berman from the Irene W. and C.B. Pennington Foundation and Rebecca Hove of the Greater Houston Community Foundation. Lori is the president and CEO of the Baton Rouge-based Irene W. and C.B. Pennington Foundation, Louisiana's largest private family foundation. She's the co-founder and chairman of the board of the Center for Disaster Philanthropy, and she created CDP's Gulf Coast Resilience Innovation Fund. She also serves as the board president of the newly established Louisiana Disaster Recovery Alliance. Rebecca is the senior director of strategic philanthropy at the Greater Houston Community Foundation. She's responsible for business development and consulting with private foundations, families, and corporations. She leads the Anti-Trafficking Donor Working Group and lends her expertise to the Next Gen Donor Institute and other key philanthropic initiatives. Welcome so much, and thanks to our panel for taking the time to speak with us today. Now we'll turn over to Henry Bertman, the CEO of Exponent Philanthropy and the sponsor of today's webinar, to welcome everyone today.
Thanks, Regine. Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us today, although quite frankly, I wish we were speaking about some other aspect of philanthropy or giving rather than recovery from the disaster that's forever going to be known as Harvey. I want to thank Regine, who's the vice president at CDP, for putting together today's program on relatively short notice, and in fact, Regine, for all the work you do every day to help those of us in the funding community. Thanks also to longtime Exponent Philanthropy members, Lori J. Bertman from the Irene W. and C.B. Pennington Foundation in Baton Rouge, as Regine just pointed out, and Rebecca Hove from the Greater Houston Community Foundation. Lori, as was just described, brings a wealth of knowledge regarding disaster philanthropy, and she lived through Katrina on the ground, so she understands it. And Rebecca, your vantage point in Houston offers us current on-the-ground perspectives and realities, and a particular thank you to you for taking some time today, because I suspect things are pretty busy down there. Now, in addition to my work at Exponent Philanthropy, I also serve on the board of the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. And one of the most important lessons I've learned during my tenure there is the need to take the long view about disasters. All of us, we're all, and justifiably so, moved by media coverage of what is oftentimes truly incomprehensible and difficult to grasp. Yet we know from Katrina and Superstorm Sandy and countless other storms and floods and forest fires, earthquakes, and other disasters, the needs go beyond blankets and coffee and continue even after the television cameras and reporters are gone. Oftentimes the effects, both physical as well as emotional, continue for years and I suspect even decades. And I also am a foundation trustee of a small staffed foundation. And in that role, I've learned that while each of us may have a specific focus to our work, education or healthcare or human services, for example, and we may not think of ourselves as disaster funders, it really is incumbent upon each of us to view help in the wake of Harvey from our mission base. I feel quite confident saying that regardless of what the focus of your foundation and your giving is, or what your mission is, there is, in the aftermath of Harvey, a need in that specific area where you can help and remain true to your mission. So as I hand the microphone back to Regine, again, my thanks to each of you for your interest and your concern for those affected by the hurricane. Yet even as we speak, another brutal storm, Irma, is taking aim at Caribbean islands and Florida. So the lessons from today, they're going to extend into tomorrow and beyond. So speaking for CDP, I'm sure, I know, as well as for Exponent Philanthropy, we're here to help you today, tomorrow, and whenever you need our assistance. Thanks for being with us. Thanks to Lori. Thanks to Rebecca. Regine, it's back to you.
Thanks so much, Henry. And I'll echo your sentiment that CDP and Exponent are absolutely here for all of you. We are truly just a phone call or an email away, so please don't be bashful. I'm going to take off my moderator hat for about 6 minutes, maybe 7, to offer some tips for disaster giving. I'm going to stick with a handful, so just 5. So first and foremost, we really encourage you as funders to take the long view. Even when focusing on these immediate needs, we really encourage you to remember that it will take some time for the full range of needs to emerge. I know we're all focused right now on power loss, transportation outages, flood damaged homes. We're looking at Hurricane Irma track up, towards Florida, but really we have yet to truly understand the impact that this storm has had on people's lives. So as you're thinking about Harvey, be patient in planning for disaster funding. Recovery is going to take a really long time, as in multiple years, and funding is going to be needed from now across the end of that recovery. Second, we really encourage you to recognize that there are places where private philanthropy can help that government agencies just can't. Private philanthropy has a reputation for being nimble and flexible and supporting gaps. And also with the increase in extreme weather events, honestly, local, state, and federal government can't always fully fund recovery. And so private philanthropy needs to be called into play for that. Private funders have the opportunity to develop innovative solutions to help prevent or mitigate future disasters that the government can't execute. So as you're thinking about how to support Hurricane Harvey recovery, keep that thought in mind. Third, support the sharing of best practices. Now, I know some of my friends don't love the term best practices, but prefer the term best known solutions. So I'll offer that up as a synonym for you all. So Florida, for example, they've developed really stringent building codes to mitigate destruction from disasters, particularly hurricanes. And as we're thinking about Harvey, perhaps interested donors could help support the transfer of expertise from Florida over to Texas before the next disaster occurs. Furthermore, there could be some research or opportunities in the immediate term to think about how to coordinate volunteers or the donation of goods in Texas. Fourth, we encourage you to connect with other funders, and platforms like Exponent Philanthropy provide the most perfect way to do that. We know that collaborative philanthropic response to the disaster leverages combined expertise and maximizes the value of the human, financial, and technical resources donated. And CDP, the Center for Disaster Philanthropy, we work really closely with community foundations, regional associations, funders, philanthropic serving organizations like Exponent, as well as responding NGOs to share trustworthy information and analysis. And then lastly, look to past disasters for guidance. There are lessons learned there that can be used to create better NGO response, to create better policy response, to make people get back or help get people back in their home more quickly. And I'll offer up a resource that CDP has, which is our Disaster Philanthropy Playbook, located at disasterplaybook.org. And it has many, actually I think it has exactly 15 strategies that you can look at that can help influence and inform how you think about Hurricane Harvey. So those are my 5 thoughts. Again, Henry and I are just an email or a phone call away. Happy to give more guidance and context around those thoughts and ideas on how to be most effective in your disaster philanthropy. But I want to turn now over to Rebecca and Lori to get their expertise and insights, because let me be honest, these two have them in spades. Lori, I'm going to kick it off to you, right? You have decades now of disaster expertise. With that in mind, how should small funders be thinking about responding to Hurricane Harvey needs? Lori, you might be on mute. Okay, let me go ahead. It seems like we've lost Lori for a second here. I'm going to pass this first question then over to Rebecca. Can you give us a view from the ground? What does the view from your office look like, and how is your community navigating the storm's relief phase right now that you're 10 days out?
Sure, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
You sound great.
Okay, Well, thank you again for reaching out to us and showing your support and care and concern for Houston. We're very honored to be on the call today. And it's funny, we almost have the situation of a tale of two cities going on here, but two cities in one. So Houston is on its way towards picking up and digging out from the impacts of Harvey. You've probably heard our Mayor Sylvester Turner, say that Houston is open for business. So 95% of our city has dried out, and folks, as you mentioned earlier, Regine, people are starting to find their new normal. They're starting to demo their houses. They are trying to find new ways to get back into their neighborhoods. They are starting to go back to work. In fact, traffic has been bananas these last 2 days because not all areas of our highways and major road thoroughfares are open yet. So you've got that component going where, again, everybody is trying to find their way back to a new normal and start resuming daily life and their own personal recovery. Then you have this other element of our city that still is experiencing disaster. We have thousands that are still in shelters because they can't return to their homes, and they're, in process for getting vouchers for vacant apartments to have a temporary place to stay. And then we also have a great component of our town on the west side of town that is still underwater and at significant levels, 6 feet, 8 feet. Those folks won't be able to return home for another 2 weeks. You all were hearing about the water mitigation releases with 2 of our overflow dams here in Houston on the west side of town. So those neighborhoods, like I said, you've got families that are going to be displaced for probably a total of a month or so, again, assuming the water recedes the way that it needs to. And another interesting thing is we have no rental cars left in our city. So again, as folks are leaving the shelters or trying to make their way back home, folks are just going out and buying new cars. But beyond the transportation issues that we're having with the roadways, sometimes just an unusual thing that you wouldn't think of is having an ample supply of rental, cars being available is now putting a kink in some people's recovery efforts. So anyways, kind of like I said, a tale of two cities all in one.
Thank you so much for that. I think I wonder how long that metaphor is going to stand. So we'll have to touch base with you again, Rebecca, in a year and see if the metaphor holds, or if there's been enough repair and reconstruction to have it one city. Lori, I think you're back on.
I am.
Oh, good. Okay, great.
I lost you guys. Thank you. I'm glad you're back. Okay.
So tell us, you've got decades of experience now responding to disasters as a philanthropist. Can you tell us how small funders should be responding or could be responding to Hurricane Harvey needs?
Sure. I'm grateful for everything that I've learned. I'm not so grateful for exactly how I've learned it. That's my new statement. But thank you. First of all, I do want to say thank you first to you, Regine, and to Henry at Exponent Philanthropy, and especially to you, Rebecca, for taking the time for this call. I know it's very difficult to do such things during such a chaotic time. So I appreciate it. One way we can learn to help you is by listening to you and hearing the needs that are in your community. So appreciate that, number one. Yeah, there are several ways that small funders can help. And when we talk about small funders, we're really talking about small foundations, maybe with large corpuses, so actually don't have the capacity or the actual disaster experience. So it seems very overwhelming that maybe private philanthropy could be very helpful during such a large disaster, but we really can. The first thing that I would say is, just like you talked about, Regine, is first sit on your hands for just a little bit, because most of the money goes to disasters, as we know, in the relief phase, which is very important, as Rebecca has just spoke about, but also that it is going to take a very long time. In my experience, much longer than you even think. So sit on your hands for 1 second and then think about your own mission. And what really is important to you and what interests you, and then connect that to what the needs are in the communities around Houston. It's one first way to kind of think about how to start giving in a disaster like Harvey. The second thing I would think about is if you are already attached to some sort of nonprofit or grantee that you're already working with that's already helping Harvey, that's a good place to start to invest in what you already know and supporting them, because they're going to need your help eventually, and as they continue to work on something unexpected like Harvey. They may not be a disaster organization, or they may be, but they're having to do that. The third thing I would also say is to actually collaborate as much as you can. You're small staffed, you don't necessarily have the capacity to do the due diligence that people like CDP or even a community foundation like the Greater Houston Community Foundation or even your association has. And so what we would do at the Pennington Foundation is when I think back to Katrina, I just went ahead and latched on to every funding partner I could find, and gained their heart, their help, their expertise. And so, for instance, for Hurricane Harvey, whether you want to leverage your money, put your money into the Harvey Fund in the long haul, you're going to actually put it in a pool of money that could then be dispersed at a later date. Or give it locally to another organization like the Greater Houston Foundation, where then, whether for relief or recovery, then you're building a larger coffer of monies with your money, as if you, and that can be given out by people who then know exactly what is needed on the ground.
That's such great insight. Thank you so much. I know what piece I hung on to there is the idea of sitting on your hands and thinking that's just so wise to hold and wait for those needs to reveal themselves. I'm going to take a little bit of a right turn and head back over to Rebecca and just ask Rebecca, like, what's your staff doing right now? How are you all focusing your time, understanding needs, and navigating, again, this sort of 10-day out place?
Yeah, so it's there has not been a lack of things to do around here, as Lori mentioned, and thank you so much for your support, Lori, and your kind email last night of just knowing what we are going through. It is, as Lori has experienced, or many of you might have experienced if you've had a trauma or disaster hit your town, it is a little bit of controlled chaos. But in that, I would say our team has really come together and really taken on the mantle of being philanthropic first responders. So, we've not been out in the boats rescuing people from neighborhoods, and we've not been at the health clinics, and some of us have been doing volunteering on our own, of course. Like, I donated some clothes to one of the shelters opening early on. But once we were able to gain access and start working again, we really have been focused in, I'd say 4 main ways. Number one, of course, is with the Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund that we're doing in partnership with, again, Houston's Mayor Sylvester Turner and our county judge, Ed Emmett. The Greater Houston Community Foundation is administering that fund, and I think to date, I just checked our numbers, that has raised from people all over the world, actually, and Houston community citizens, $34,480,000 and change so far. We are being very open and transparent throughout this whole process, and we're posting the new totals each day after noon Central Time. And then we're going to be, providing updates throughout this process as the review committee makes their grant recommendations and the selections and distributions are made. All of that will be public on our website. So that's the first thing, the Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund in combination with our city leaders. The second thing, obviously, we've been taking care of our donors and advising them similar to this call, giving them tips and tricks and strategies, also sharing the same philosophy that you all are mentioning here. The third thing that we're staying focused on is our corporate clients and how to engage them and help them in this time of need. And that's either through corporate donor advised funds, or what my team has been predominantly focused on are helping our corporate partners set up corporate disaster relief funds for their employees. As you all, I'm sure, are aware, this is a federally qualified disaster. And so that means that companies can make tax-deductible grants towards employees of their company that have been affected by this. So folks giving into the fund get a tax deduction for their gift, and then these resources that are going directly to company individuals to help them rebuild their lives, it's also a non-taxable event for them for the assistance that they're receiving. So we've had actually over 140 of those calls that my team has been furiously responding to and fielding, and we've been able to set up about 25 of those accounts already. So again, getting direct assistance into the hands that have of people that have been impacted. And then the fourth thing is kind of an interesting thing. People wouldn't really think about it for us to be focusing on, but as folks have reached out to help us and offer support, we've been focusing on that. How can we best utilize offers of help that we're getting? So we have donors that have come in to volunteer and answer our phone lines. We've created a resource sheet that's out on our website about, what to do if you have things to give, and then what and who and where to go if you are in need of things. So we have people sourcing information and making FAQs and all kinds of interesting, unique ways for our partners in our community to help us by volunteering their time in a way that they can be giving back to the community through supporting the work that we're trying to do.
That's amazing, Rebecca, to use your own donors as your volunteer support. That's so, I have to say, that's so cool. It's just amazing. I love hearing that. And I love the emphasis that you have on transparency. Certainly the team over at CDP has been looking, and if you can't hear us clapping about the generosity that we see coming through your fund, I hope you have a visual of that for us.
Oh, thank you. We're very grateful. Thank you to everybody for all the help.
Yep. Our country is pretty generous, pretty incredible. So that's great. Lori, again, you have lived in Louisiana for years now. And 2016 was not an easy year for Louisiana at all. Can you talk with us about your recent experience with the flood disasters and how you responded as a funder as well?
Yeah, thank you, Regine, for even the opportunity to talk about that. We had a little bit of a different experience. We had actually catastrophic floods with no name. In fact, they had numbers. I think 4722, and I can't even remember the numbers, but they were actually not very sexy names, and they did not draw down much funding. So we had to really improvise, unlike Hurricane Harvey, where money is coming in left and right and still needs much more. This was a situation where we were completely flooded. 85% of Louisiana is still in recovery of some sort from these floods that happened in March and August of last year, and many people are still not in their homes, and many businesses are still not back up and running. And so as a funder, what we had to do is really first, we did something new and different. You spoke about innovation. For the first time, you know, I talk about collaboration a lot, and I think it's a lesson we learned, and we don't do enough of it a lot of times during disasters. But we really, for the first time, had to rely on both collaboration within the sector, the nonprofit sector, but then also with our local funders and then some national funders, but then also some cross collaboration with FEMA and the state. And we developed something called the Louisiana Disaster Recovery Alliance with this same viewpoint of long-term recovery. And so this fund now works just specifically on long-term recovery in Louisiana. We've been called by several different states for replication on this, and what's wonderful is we actually have a FEMA liaison, which has helped actually a small staff like ours helped us with some, you know, ancillary information, and really has been a wonderful resource to work with. So not only our own friends as well, like CDP, which we go to all the time and we work through all the time, but also this was a new way that we could work across sectors. We also just want to mention with Hurricane Harvey is that we were impacted by Hurricane Harvey in two ways. We did experience some loss of infrastructure and some homes in Southwest Louisiana, but then also we are sheltering many people in Alexandria and Baton Rouge, and then in Southwest Louisiana, we're using that as a staging and donations place for people from Texas to be able to register for FEMA and sheltering as well. So Louisiana is playing an active role now, as while they're still recovering from the floods of last year.
Thank you so much for that. Again, pointing out how important the long view is. And for those of you who are listening today, certainly among many of us, we often talk about the upside and the downside of having storms named, and what that can do to support a recovery process by providing more light and attention on a particular disaster. Rebecca, I know that you are just, again, I'll say it again, you're on day 10. And I'm just curious what, from your experience now, not only with Hurricane Harvey, but with the flooding that Houston and surrounding areas have experienced over the past couple of years, what do you think that small funders should think about when funding each phase of a disaster?
Sure, thanks for that. And I am giggling a little to myself with the day 10 reference, because most of us are like, what day is today? I mean, literally, it's been difficult at times to keep up with information changing, and just the kind of how you started the call, the on the ground scenario, and what's at stake today changes day by day, 24 hours by 24 hours. I'm probably going to sound a little bit like a broken record, because even though we didn't plan this, all of us are so on message. Disasters really do have their own metamorphosis trajectory. And I think, you all are hearing that loud and clear. It is a long view. There are distinct phases that people and cities are experiencing. Exactly what Lori just shared about recovering from events still from Katrina or from other natural disasters even last year. We have had the same thing here in Houston. We had, they were also, as Lori mentioned, these events were not federally qualified, but what Houstonians call the Tax Day and Memorial Day floods. They probably do have some number that, just like Lori was referring to, we don't know the numbers. People just remembered them by basically the time stamp of what was happening in life at that point. And some of those folks from the 2016 two separate flood events had just finished remodeling their homes, getting life back to normal, moving back in, and here they go, they're starting all over again. So I think my top three things of thinking about what, funders with small or few staff members can consider as a strategy during different phases of the disaster are, again, number one, just take a deep breath. Remember, everybody's trying to get their feet under them, and if you're looking for a fancy master strategic plan, that will unfold over time. So my number one tip to people is often service. If you can get out and want to get out into the community and serve and be a part of the power of doing, that cannot be underestimated in terms of philanthropy. Dollars are always important, and there is always a long-term and sustaining need for dollars. But getting out and serving actually helps people put some of that anxious energy to use and gives them a way to express that in their community. And also gives them an opportunity to experience what the community needs are and see that firsthand. Or by partnering with one of their, maybe it's a long-term grantee partner that you can show up in a way of support for that organization or for the work that they're doing, and that also will help inform what you want your longer-term grant strategy to be. So if you can't get out there or don't want to, service isn't for everybody, then I definitely, the first couple calls that I make are to those key nonprofit partners that we have that can give us that frontline information. The second thing I ask people to consider thinking about, and Lori touched on this some too, are, what local partners, where you're still in like the immediate disaster and immediate relief stages, what local partners can service the direct needs most efficiently and quickly at scale. And if you want to be writing checks, then I would encourage people to look to their local service providers that are handling now an increased demand for direct needs and supplies. And then organizations that are able to work with either a voucher system or a debit card system or, a preferred hotel chain partner to start taking care of some of those immediate personal needs that people have. If funders want to consider supporting local but also at the national level, then I do recommend that they look at national partners that can help provide aspects of infrastructure. So, and that's not just shelter. We all know that American Red Cross is very top of mind and well known and gets lots of play for being a shelter coordinator and provider. But there are also other needs like water distribution or food distribution or other things that take infrastructure that oftentimes large national groups can come in and help provide kind of a solution in a box. So that's my number two. Number one is service. Number two is, again, local direct needs or national organizations that can provide overlaying infrastructure. And then the third thing, again, is what people have mentioned already, the timing. Really think about the timing of your giving. And as was already said before, if you can wait, do so. Think about what the right time and the right place for the right size of grant is. And really only you are going to know that for your foundation or for what's happening in your community. But as we've all said, after the disaster happens and relief begins, there is a long period of protracted recovery where some of these larger often gifts can be made. And then after recovery, you have sustaining of the new normal. And that is, again, where sometimes large strategic gifts can be made as an organization has had to build their capacity or go to scale. You know, they now have a larger customer base, client base to serve, and their operations budget has increased. And how do you want to show up for that organization considering now this elevated level that they're operating at, perhaps for many years into the future? We still have folks from, again, a shared history with Lori. We still have folks here in Houston that have not fully recovered from Katrina, and whether that's they're living in Houston full time or they go back and forth as they're still trying to rebuild their neighborhood or rebuild their home back in Louisiana. So again, you can take, you know, a 5-7 year view here when you're thinking about how best to support your nonprofit implementing partners.
Rebecca, thank you so much. As you already said, it feels like we're all totally in alignment on this. I'm going to direct my next comment over to all of our participants that are on the line. If you look at the bottom of your screen, there's this little Q&A box, and you all are more than welcome to put any question that you have for me, or not for me, but for me to field over to Lori and Rebecca in that Q&A box. I did see one question come through chat. I'll put that over in Q&A in just a few minutes here. So be thinking of your questions and what you want to hear more from Lori and Rebecca. Lori, talk to me again with your expertise in long-term recovery. Can you talk through what you know to be true of the long-term recovery and funder picture in a disaster like this?
Yeah, there's one issue that we have not spoken about, though I have gotten knocked off on this webinar a couple times, so forgive me if I didn't hear it, is we haven't talked about the issue of mental health, and I want to speak to it. I loved what Rebecca said about day 10, and she said, well, you know, I don't even know what day it is. That doesn't mean anything except that it is very, very chaotic. And then when you think about that for going through that, or people being displaced for so many, and a community being kind of in a chaotic state for so many months or years, it really does impact people's mental health. And I think that is an area for which funders have not invested as much as I would have liked to see. And it's been a real lesson over the last 20 years working in this space that I have not necessarily seen a growth in that area. And I'd love to see funders really think through about not only funding mental health programs for their own staff, for the staff of the nonprofits that they work with, and then different types of programs in the mental health area throughout the long-term recovery of an entire disaster. So that was one point that I felt I really just wanted to make that's very specific about the long view. The other piece that I think Rebecca spoke on is that because private philanthropy is flexible, what I have learned about the long view is that, you know, we have this great ability to be able to time our gifts over time. It takes, first of all, it takes longer than we think it's going to take. So I think on the last webinar, somebody said something about 1 day of relief is 10 days of long-term recovery. I would even say that it's even longer than that in all of the different disasters that I've dealt with. So with that in mind, I would pace myself as a funder and focus on really thinking about getting people back to normalcy as fast as possible, and then working around them around infrastructure, and then getting their communities back. Because what we do know is once people have their health, their support systems, and a job, they are going to do better in terms of their recovery. And the swifter we could do that for them, the better we are going to be as a community, and the more successful we're going to be in our investments into that community.
Thanks so much for that, Lori. We are getting lots of activity over in the Q&A right now, and so I'm going to field a couple of these. Rebecca, these two questions I think you'll be able to answer in one go around. The first is, what's the minimum that a company needs to start a disaster relief fund? And the second is, what's the time frame for the Greater Houston Community Foundation to make grants from the $34 million it's received?
Perfect. So the minimum for a disaster relief fund is $50,000. And Regine, I don't know if our information is out there on the call. I do have the visuals up in front of me, but if anybody wants to connect with me after the call, my email is my first initial last name. So R Hove, H-O-V like Victor, E, at ghcf.org, and I'll be happy to, answer further questions offline. But that $50,000 is the minimum. And then the rate of time that the funds will be dispersed from the mayor and the county judges fund, we don't have an exact, time limit set for it yet, but it will be over the course of a year or more. They are going to be taking a very strategic look at our community landscape. The areas that they've decided to focus on, of course, immediate relief efforts to aid victims of flooding. Then we're going to be looking at not only the shelter needs that are including now, but temporary housing needs. And temporary is undefined. Sometimes, again, as Lori's mentioning, sometimes temporary for one family means 2 months. For another family, that could mean 18 months. Temporary housing needs, food supply, healthcare, and Lori did also mention mental health. We are staying aware and attuned to those needs. Then food and supplies, I think I already said that, sorry. Healthcare, transportation, childcare, facility needs for childcare locations, and then social service agencies. And then we also are leaving ourselves, or the committee is leaving themselves open to other purposes that become evident as we move through this event. And so that will be over the course of, an undefined but multiple month period over the next year and perhaps beyond.
Okay. Oh, that is so helpful. That is incredibly helpful. Thank you so much. And I appreciate you giving your email so that way people can get in touch with you. That makes it really easy and awesome. Thank you. I'm reading off the screen, which is why I'm stuttering a little bit, just making sure I get these questions. Lori, question for you. What strategies do you, either at the Pennington Foundation or in your role working with the Center for Disaster Philanthropy or the Louisiana Disaster Recovery Alliance, what strategies do you have in terms of getting funding to the most vulnerable populations, like low-income, minorities, disabled? I'll actually, this wasn't in the original question, but I'll add in there a question about new Americans and or undocumented individuals.
Well, I think that's such a good question, and I think that we're considering those strategies right now. I mean, right now we want to make sure that we're investing in organizations that take that into consideration. So, social justice, anything that relates to vulnerable populations, those are what we're looking at. So we're not going to be investing in anything that any organizations or anybody that does not is not going to get money on the ground to individuals that meet that population, because we know that population is impacted more by disasters than any other population. And what we also, I think all of us on this call at some level in our mission, that's part of our mission, is to work with vulnerable populations. And so our strategies really are to fund the programs that consider that. And so that's why we work very closely with, CDP. We know that CDP is going to be looking, we give money to the Harvey Fund because we know that the Harvey Fund is going to be looking at that when they make their grants into Harvey, right? So into Houston. And for LDRA, that's actually part of one of our tenets, is that we look at vulnerable populations. And so we look at different mapping programs and different organizations that can provide that information for us.
Super helpful, Lori. Thank you. Another question, Rebecca, about your fund. Is your relief fund just for Houston, or will it extend to other communities?
And we do have, just so everybody is aware, we're posting information like this on our website as well as on our social media channels to try and keep everybody informed. But yes, the fund will have a little bit of a reach to other areas, such as Fort Bend County, Montgomery County, and then of course efforts here in Harris County, which is kind of Houston proper. So it's Houston and some of the surrounding counties. Unfortunately, at this time, I would have to check with my colleagues in, Corpus Christi or the Rockport area where actually the hurricane took landfall. Our fund is not reaching all the way down to those communities or over to Beaumont. I mean, we're probably like a 3.5-hour drive, or sometimes 4, to Rockport and Corpus Christi. So I think if folks are interested, obviously, in the rebuilding efforts that are happening in those cities, they can reach out to, those cities' community foundations or their Chamber of Commerce. But for the mayor and the county judges fund, yes, it will be a multi-county, it will have multi-county reach. The other thing I wanted to mention really quickly, just on Lori's question, Regine, that you were wondering about non-status citizens or immigrant and undocumented citizens. The Mayor's Fund, again, will be supporting all people of Houston, regardless of documentation status. So people that can get to places where services can be provided will be provided services regardless of their status. As well as we have another partner here at Greater Houston Community Foundation called the Legal Services Immigration Collaborative. And that collaborative group of nonprofits is specifically opening a fund to help that specific demographic. So we've got several ways that we're reaching that specific vulnerable population group.
That's incredible. Thank you for that. Lori, question for you. And I'm thinking about the membership of Exponent Philanthropy and Henry's close colleagues here. Can you tell us how, as a private entity, a private family foundation, how do you work effectively with community foundations and other philanthropy serving organizations like Exponent and like CDP in times of disasters?
Oh, I love this question because this is the only way to get through it, guys. I swear. Look at all the wonderful information that Rebecca's providing. So she just answered a wonderful question that I just teed up in an answer where I need grantees, obviously, for that focus on undocumented immigrants, because that's something that's important to us to make sure that, and I want to understand that everyone is getting aid. So that's an example of that. But what we did in Louisiana after Katrina is we set up something called the Pennington Disaster Resilience Fund at the Baton Rouge Area Foundation. That fund I had for many, many years. And that was solely just a fund that we advised about disasters. So we actually moved it outside of our corpus, and that fund dealt with disasters from A to Z. It was through the life cycle of disasters. And what we got from that, we got the help of people, wonderful people like Rebecca, to extend my staff and help us think through, be strategic partners, but then also to handle the back office related to anything as it related to disasters, because they became so prevalent, and Katrina was such a big deal, along with all the other hurricanes and floods that came after that. From the Pennington, from there, we the creation of CDP came along, and CDP, which in some ways is a community foundation that is solely, just focused on disasters 365 days a year, is really how we now do our grant making. So Regine has me on, I have Regine on speed dial, and she, sadly, and for Regine, what we do is, we have a fund there also now called the Gulf Coast Innovation Fund, where we actually invest in and then help advise and work with her team to help us develop the best thinking in terms of disaster philanthropy, so we don't have to do it alone. So I've created all these partners, but I find that the best partners have been community foundations and working with CDP, and then looking to our associations like Exponent for like funders who might want to collaborate on specific issues.
Nice. Thanks, Lori. Okay, I'm looking at the Q&As, and I think we have time for one more. There are several questions that our audience has posed, and I'm going to let you two decide which one of you is going to take this, but there's several that are focused around climate change. So what role can we play to connect the dots to these ongoing disasters and climate change? How do you balance the need to mitigate the long-term threat of climate change and its associated increase in the frequency and intensity of these kinds of disasters with immediate recovery needs? And then last one, I'll say that you don't have to combine them all. I'm just giving you a morsel of how climate change is popping up. Do you feel that long-term thinking should include climate change conversations, since scientists did predict this in other natural disasters? So Lori, Rebecca, which one of you wants to tackle the climate change question?
This is Rebecca. I'll lead out because it's kind of a chump answer. Number one, I am not a climatologist, so I partially do not feel professionally credentialed to answer these questions. But what I can say is I know as a person, and as I'll be doing my part to do my own homework on climate change issues and the effects and what the science and the data says, and then sharing that knowledge and information. I mean, I think that's one of the number one things we do as funders is, get educated, get some experience, and then use that knowledge and convening power to have change-making conversations, the best that we can. And I definitely know that people are already doing that. But since I'm not credentialed in this area, I kind of feel like that's what I can do as a citizen, and that's what I can do as part of my job. Secondly, and I'm also not a proxy for the city, but I do know that our city has gone through a process of really looking at our urban environmental environment, and we've got some wonderful initiatives going on to expand our green space for creative ways. That I also saw a question in here that we're not going to have time to address, but about school, like creative ways to bring the environment and nature back into the schools and into that component of education and getting kids out into nature, which again, climate change is much larger than just green space and being outside. But I think that general awareness of our environment and the changes in our environment and what we can do as citizens and what we can do as a city is, if anything, a place to start. It's probably not the sophisticated answer that somebody is hoping that I might have.
No, I thought that was great, Rebecca. And I will agree with you in terms of what we can do as our roles as just good, solid citizens. Before I start to wrap, I want to let everybody know that on the Exponent Philanthropy website, we have a discussion list where questions can actually be posted and shared so that all members can learn from one another. So if you look at the exponentphilanthropy.org homepage and then click on the Connections tab, that's where you would find it. So for instance, if I didn't get to one of your questions, I'm really sorry, but that would be a place where you could again, continue to carry on these discussions. You'll see a slide just popped up as well about additional resources that you may find helpful as you continue your own research and thoughtfulness about Hurricane Harvey. But I am going to wrap up. Like I was saying, CDP has many additional resources and information on our website as well as the Exponent Philanthropy website. We have launched our CDP Hurricane Harvey Recovery Fund, which will be devoted to medium and long-term needs in this disaster. I really want to respect everybody's time and keep this call to an hour, although I would love to talk to Henry and Rebecca and Lori for much longer than that. So I'll thank Lori and Rebecca for taking your time to share your insights. Again, special thanks, Rebecca, for taking this call in what we know is a crazy busy time for you. Super special thanks to Henry Berman and Exponent Philanthropy for sponsoring this webinar, and just sincerest thanks to you all for having joined this call. If you have any other questions or thoughts that weren't addressed during today's conference call, like I said, you can put that on the Exponent site, but you're also more than welcome to email me directly at Regine, it's REGINE, .webster@disasterphilanthropy.org. And one last note about Exponent Philanthropy before I forget is to say that we'll have a posting of this recording and the slide deck available within the next 48 hours, and that'll go up on the Exponent Philanthropy website as well. And I will go ahead and wrap and say thank you all so much and have a wonderful, wonderful afternoon. Thanks so much for your interest in Hurricane Harvey. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you, Regine.
Thank you.